Hey everyone, GXVL here, and this is going to be technically a part 2 in regards of Supergirl, alright? I say this because, if you haven't seen the video of me in regarding of talking about my review of the comic book, Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow, I would suggest to watch that first before watching this. But now to get into the review, I want to say to already give my verdict. 6 Dragon Balls out of 7 Dragon Balls. I thought it was actually a great movie. I thought I would hate it as much as anyone else, but no, I did not. And I'm glad I actually read the comic book at first hand. Again, I'm going to look into that video first before checking this out, because I'm about to break down the movie, especially how I compare it to the comic book, alright? Because, of course, Lobo was never in the comic book whatsoever, so I do want to address him first. And that, they are definitely going to set him up for future film installments, and I actually do look forward into seeing that. Now, I wouldn't say that that he was a bad inclusion whatsoever, but I wouldn't say he was a great one either. As far as I know, there's definitely a middle ground to it that he just creates more conflict within what's happening into the story, all right? And plus, I actually really did enjoy Jason Momoa's Lobo a lot, and you know what? He pulls it off very good, and I could tell he was having a good time. But hey, that's all I had to say about with Lobo. Let's actually talk about the meat and potatoes, which is Ruth and Supergirl. Now, since my gripe from the comic was that there was so much narration from Ruth, especially that it was pushed more that it was her story than was Supergirl's story, this is actually a Supergirl story, and I am grateful for that. And also, I just think that the writing, when it comes to dialogue, I just think they just basically what they got from the comic book just to be treated as its own thing, and I think it works, personally for me. And I think it was actually executed well in a way where they had to make Kara Zor-El, Supergirl herself, a little bit much more integral, much more important, more than ever, especially for her to deal with her trauma. Because in the comic book, they don't portray her trauma that fundamentally deep whatsoever. I'm not going to neither be saying that they brush off her trauma aside from said comic book. Yeah, it's kind of there, but it doesn't seem to fit with the theme that the comic book was going for. Especially that it was very colorful, very cosmic, while the movie is going more for maybe a Mad Max-ish kind of cosmic tone, if that makes any sense. I've never seen those movies at all, but that's the kind of vibe I'm getting it from there. And I do think that's a weird deviation away from said comic book, but I don't hate it though, alright? And with the music being displayed, I didn't hate the music whatsoever. Both the score and the soundtracks that they went with, I think it clashes very well. Heck, I'm surprised they didn't choose a little bit off from Five Finger Death Punch to be used in this film, because I think it sets the tone very well for Kara's character arc and her personality, especially what she's dealing with, her own internal struggle. Heck, I want to say that's more of the main antagonist, herself, alright? But she's also the protagonist, because if you want to say that Krim of the Yellow Hills is a forgettable villain, I won't argue that, because my own personal opinion is that he's just a weak villain. Or he's not even a villain at all. He is just an asshole. I already described Krim from the comic book that he looks like an Irish Kano from outer space. This version of Krim does not do any much better. And I'm not gonna be saying that that this Krim from the comic had a lot more personality. No, this Krim had no personality at all either. So this is not the filmmaker's fault here. They were just trying to make him more intimidating, and I can respect that, but Krim, overall, from both movie and comic book, he's just not a good, antagonist. He's just an asshole. And let me be for real and let me be blunt. Assholes can be, good characters too, especially when they're not being antagonists whatsoever. There's Bender from Futurama. You can argue that, but that's more in a comedic take. Nah, he's still an asshole altogether. So, let's not ignore that. There's Deadpool 2, and I don't care that he breaks the fourth wall, he's still technically an asshole. So yeah, any other characters that you think of that are assholes, if you are trying to portray them in a way that like that they're antagonists or protagonists or a side character, they're just an asshole. And I just need to make that very clear, and that very big distinction, because like yeah, I guess being an asshole can make you like a villain in a way, I suppose, but I've seen a much more intimidating villain from the likes of the Karate Kid films, alright? Or at least from the previous film, which, look, as someone who hates Lex Luthor as a bad guy for Superman, that works, at least. At least I was hating Lex Luthor for the right reasons, alright? Unlike with Zack Snyder's take on Lex Luthor, alright? But hey, that's still kind of relevant, because like you got to portray the character the way they are intended supposed to be, because that was not Lex Luthor. That was basically Riddler trying to portray as Lex Luthor from Snyder's film. All right, and so yeah, I do think there needs to be a much more stronger villain to like make us really care for the characters. But overall, even though that I do say that the film is great, I'm not saying it's a masterpiece. Okay, because I do want to address that like another thing is like the pacing. I do think the pacing was a little bit too fast, especially that like within like in the first 6 minutes. I do think this is kind of like a bit of a switcheroo here, and I know that I said that like I'm glad that they are pushing that this angle, that this is Supergirl's story without Ruthie like basically narrating over Kara's flashbacks. I'm glad they didn't do that, and I'm glad there's no freaking globe to be seen as a MacGuffin in this, just for like Kara to go back to square one. All right, so I'm glad they removed that. But I do need to mention this, that like in the comic book, is that we get to introduce to Ruthie herself at first. All right, but in the movie, it's Kara first and Ruthie second, and I think that's a good move. But I just think with this kind of pacing though, and especially what they fundamentally changed overall, is that like, oh, Ruthie, her family is dead, and I do want to make this one pinpoint, just to point at this, that I want to say her own sibling, I want to say a brother, tries to like simply, you know, like trying to goof off, trying to like scare his own sister, right? Not noticing that Krim is in his own house, gets killed right in front of Ruthie, and then Krim just kills the parents off, all right? And that Krim doesn't even know that Ruthie was there, all right? And to me, I was like, okay, then that happened a little bit fast, especially within the 6 minutes or so. I'm not kidding when I say that, because I did pause at certain moments. And I was like, oh, okay, yeah. So yes, I do think the movie has fast pacing, and because seeing that, I was like, yeah, that was kind of ridiculous how they executed that way. I won't lie. Let me see. And another thing I do want to mention is that like, oh, the visual effects. It's a hit or miss when it comes to the visual effects, and especially that like there are instances where I'm like, okay, then it kind of makes sense that like with Kara, she knows other alien languages, so she stretches her mouth to communicate with another alien. Okay, that makes sense. But then other instances where I see whenever she's in action, I'm like, yeah, I can tell there are some visual effects here and there. Some seem a little polished, other parts not so much though. So I have seen people trying to like paint out that mainly Alcock's Kara doesn't look attractive or whatsoever. I blame the special effects for that in that department, not much of Millie herself, because in my opinion she kind of looks kind of pretty, and especially when looking at the interviews, I think it might just be the jaw that people are off put. And just to make another example to compare this, is that like I have seen the actress when it comes to like the interviews of said actress, is what I mean. If you guys recall the whole like that new remake or reboot that is the Disney's live action Little Mermaid. Now I have seen between the interviews and then her, I think her name was Halle Berry or because like I do not want to mix up her name when it comes to someone who portrayed Storm from the X-Men. All right, so you know who I mean, right? Just bear with me. Is that like she has like the effects that makes her eyes look a little bit more drifted apart. When it comes to the actual her actual self in interviews, she doesn't have that problem. So it's more of like special effects are somehow missing with like facial features, especially in like in these settings that are like CGI or maybe not CGI, and yet you still have to put special effects on there to like still make them look stand out, I guess. But it is jarring for me to now notice that. All right, so this movie does have that problem. All right, this movie has that problem. Let me see. Oh, but again, I still want to talk about the story of the movie. That like, so for Kara to be motivated to like go after Crimson's crypto is the very last piece that holds dear to home. Is that like, while that makes sense, she is not just only looking out for crypto and that he is poisoned, because unlike in the comic, because in the comic he is getting treated very well without needing said antidote just by going after Crim, because Supergirl in that comic, she's looking out for Ruth. So this version of Kara, she's still technically looking after Ruth, because like every time that Lobo he comes back in the scene, is that like, no, don't kill him. Why? He deserves it. Like, you wouldn't understand. Because what Lobo does not understand, and especially if you are the audience yourself, is that like she does not want Ruth to lead into the same path of what either Lobo or Crim are. Like, you don't want a young a kid to be that vengeful. So imagine like you'll be seeing like basically preventing her to becoming like Sasuke Uchiha by extent, if that makes any sense. I'm just saying. So, and Kara does just that, and I think people kind of like maybe miss the points, and there are some people out there thinking that like Kara is kind of being a hypocrite, like all the times that she was trying to lecture Ruth that she shouldn't kill like Crim whatsoever, when Kara did kill Crim. I'm like, she killed him because Kara is already dealing with so much trauma and that she's trying to do better. And heck, in one of the earlier scenes when that Crim was trying to like hunt down on one of the escapee bridesmaids that he captured, right? But to just like still like hunt her down. Heck, he killed her parents, all right, and then he killed her. And that looking at Supergirl's face, her face expression, and people have told themselves, especially in reviews, that like, hey, you know the saying, don't show, don't tell. I can tell by the look on her expression, despite what she's saying, that like, she's just trying to do this for crypto. But also, she knows that like that she fucked up, that she messed up, you know, that like that she failed to save another human being, and she thought she already lit someone that was the last of the escapee bridesmaids. So you know how realize she fucked up is that like she goes up in the sky. She goes up in the sky and screams. But of course you don't hear her scream, but you see her scream. That's how she's feeling, because she's struggling. Especially, like, again, not just the trauma, but the fact that like everything that's been going around with her, especially that with Lobo in the mix, it just kind of like overwhelms her. And I think that people just don't see that. They just see something else from their own perspective for some weird reason. And especially like, I don't think they've read the comic book whatsoever. They just only see the movie and they just think that like, oh, this is poor story writing right here, folks. And I'm like, is it though? Is it really? Even when they actually translated what was actually from the comic book into a story, I would understand like they didn't execute it well. That would be a given. But I didn't think it was executed bad at all, at least in my eyes. All right. So yeah, that's all I have to say. What do you guys honestly think with the Supergirl film yourself, since you already seen it, I bet, right? Do you guys have your own opinion? Do you think that the whole hate has been overblown? This has been GXVL saying off right now. Later.